Have you ever wondered what truly happens when someone reaches enlightenment? Do they stop suffering completely? Do they vanish from the world, becoming someone supernatural? Or do they simply live on, quietly, like any ordinary person, but with a heart that is truly free? If that question has ever stirred something in you, please feel free to leave a comment below, so we know we are not alone in this path of deep inquiry. Let me share with you a true story from the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha's original discourses. One day, a group of monks came to ask the Buddha, "Venerable Sir, when an arahantone who has completely removed greed, hatred, and delusion passes away, where do they go?" The Buddha replied, "Just as a fire goes out when its fuel is finished, no one can say it goes east, west, north, or south. In the same way, for the arahant, there is no more rebirth." So simple, so clear, so peaceful. Nibbana is not a place, and it is not disappearance. It is the complete extinguishing of all causes that keep the cycle of suffering going. In early Buddhism, enlightenment is not about gaining supernatural powers. It is about letting go completely of the 10 fetters that bind the mind. It is about seeing deeply that life is suffering, impermanent, and not self. And when all grasping fades, Nibbana is revealed like a fire that goes out when there is nothing left to burn. In this video, I invite you to walk with me into this mystery. What is enlightenment? What changes? And what doesn't? Please stay with us until the end, not just to listen with your ears, but to feel with your heart. This is TT-Buddhism, a channel where we come together to nourish insight and compassion through the original teachings of the Buddha. If you find meaning here, you're welcome to like, subscribe, and share it with those who may need it. And now, I invite you to take a quiet step through the open doorway of awakening. Part 1. Misunderstandings about enlightenment. One quiet morning, in the monastery garden, a traveler came to visit. He was not a monk, nor someone we had known before, but his eyes carried the weariness of long journeys through many places, many emotions, perhaps even many disappointments. He sat down on the veranda, took off his dusty shoes, and looked around as if he had stepped into a different world. I came over and poured him a cup of tea. He held it with both hands, slowly, then looked at me and asked, "Teacher, how can one become enlightened? Does an enlightened person still suffer? Do they become some kind of divine being beyond the world? Or do they just live like a very ordinary person, but truly free?" I didn't answer right away. In the courtyard, a yellow leaf had just fallen, touching the ground as gently as a whisper. I pointed to the leaf and said, "Enlightenment isn't about becoming someone else. It's when you see a leaf fall and your heart doesn't react. No grasping, no rejecting, just the leaf, just the falling, just presence." Many people think enlightenment is something magical, like a sudden burst of divine light, or a trance, where the person becomes something more than human. Some imagine that once enlightened, a person will feel no more emotions, no sadness, no pain, only peace and stillness, like a sacred stone. But this is a misunderstanding. In the original teachings, the Buddha never said that an enlightened person is devoid of feeling. He only said that such a person is no longer bound by feelings, They still feel the warmth of sunlight. They still smile at children playing. They still feel compassion for others in pain. But in all those feelings, there is no separate self clinging to them, no me that wants to hold or control. The Buddha did not teach us to destroy our emotions. He taught us to look deeply and see that emotions are like guests. They come, they stay for a while, and they go. If we do not invite them in or push them away, they cannot disturb us. An enlightened person is someone who no longer gets pulled around by what comes and goes. I remember once a disciple named Vaka asked the Buddha, "Venerable Sir, when an arahant, someone who has completely ended greed, hatred, and delusion passes away, where do they go? Do they still exist?" And the Buddha answered with a beautiful image. Just as a fire goes out when its fuel is gone, no one can say it goes east or west. In the same way, the arahant does not go anywhere after death because the causes for rebirth are fully extinguished. Anguttara Nikaya. This teaching is not just about nibbana. It is also about the nature of enlightenment itself. Enlightenment is not about gaining something new. It is about the ending of the conditions that give rise to suffering. Like a lake disturbed by the wind, when the wind stops, the lake becomes still. We don't have to create stillness. It was already there, just hidden beneath the waves. Enlightenment is a returning to the original quiet of the heart, not some special state to be achieved. I remember once, a little French girl asked me during a retreat, "Teacher, is enlightenment when we never suffer again?" I smiled and asked her gently, "Do you know where suffering comes from?" She was silent. I placed my hand over my chest and said, "It comes from here, from not understanding, from wanting what we cannot have, from holding on to what is not real. When you understand that, and you can smile to your feelings with kindness, then you are already walking the path of enlightenment." She nodded quietly and looked up at the sky. On the roof above us, a small sparrow sat still, listening to the wind. There was nothing more that needed to be said. People are often captivated by the idea of an enlightened person, but sometimes that very idea becomes the obstacle. If we think of enlightenment as a prize, a title, a final event, we miss the truth. The truth is, enlightenment is not ahead of us. It's not waiting at the end of some path. It is here right now when we stop, relax, and look deeply. It is here when we wash the dishes with a calm mind, when we sit with someone we love without needing them to be different, when we feel pain and still remember to breathe. And each time we do, a little bit of delusion fades, a little bit of bondage loosens, a little light shines in the heart. Perhaps enlightenment isn't something that happens once and for all. Perhaps it is a return again and again, with each breath, with each letting go. And when there is no one left inside us who wants to be enlightened, then that is enlightenment. Part 2. Enlightenment is letting go, not adding more. One day, during a quiet tea meditation, a student sitting across from me looked thoughtful. After a long pause, he asked, "Teacher, does an enlightened person understand everything? Do they know all things in this world?" I smiled, gently poured more tea into his cup, and replied, "No, my dear. An enlightened person is not someone who knows everything. They are someone who no longer needs to know everything." I looked at him and began to share a story. One day, the Buddha was sitting in the forest with his disciples. He picked up a small handful of leaves and asked them, "Monks, what do you think?" Are the leaves in my hand more, or the leaves in the forest? They answered, Venerable Sir, the leaves in your hand are few, but the leaves in the forest are many. The Buddha nodded and said, In the same way, what I know is vast like the leaves in the forest, but what I teach is only like the leaves in my hand, because those are the things that lead to the end of suffering. Riddles. Enlightenment is not about collecting more information. It is not about adding more to the mind. It is about letting go of false ideas, of fixed identities, of craving and fear. I remember a woman who once came to the monastery during a winter afternoon. She sat by the bamboo grove for a long time in silence. When I approached her, she quietly shared that she had exhausted herself trying to change her children. She wanted them to be successful, respectful, obedient according to her expectations. But the more she tried, the more distant they became. The more she pushed, the more hurt she felt. One day, she listened to a Dharma talk about the breath, about returning to oneself before trying to fix others. She began sitting quietly for 10 minutes each evening. She practiced breathing and knowing she was breathing. She listened to her children without interrupting. She washed dishes slowly and without rushing. And then, one day, she realized it wasn't her children who had changed. It was she who had changed. From that moment on, she stopped forcing, stopped blaming, stopped expecting. She simply loved, with no conditions. And strangely, her children began to open their hearts too. I told her that day, perhaps you've already taken a step into enlightenment, because enlightenment begins with returning, not going far. We are raised in a culture that teaches, to be happy, you must have more degrees, more money, more admiration, more success. But the Buddha taught the opposite. He taught that to find peace, we must have less attachment, less comparison, less fear, less ego. The unenlightened person is like someone carrying a heavy bag on their back. They think, if I just add one more thing, I'll finally feel whole. But the enlightened one is the person who sets the bag down and says, Oh, I've had everything I needed all along. I just didn't see it. Someone once asked me, Teacher, is enlightenment a sudden moment, or is it a slow process? I replied, sometimes it comes like a sudden moment of stillness, but often it is small steps, each mindful breath, each compassionate glance, each quiet letting go. Enlightenment can be the drop that overflows the cup, but before that, many drops have fallen unnoticed. So don't wait for enlightenment to appear like a miracle. Begin with what is simple, a single conscious breath, a gentle word, a moment when you stop needing to be right. Each time you do, a bit of illusion dissolves. Enlightenment is not at the end of the road. It is how you walk the road. I once met an old monk in the mountains. He was not famous. He didn't teach on YouTube. He hadn't written any books. But sitting near him, I felt something very still, very peaceful. He didn't need to say much. Every movement, pouring tea, picking up leaves, sweeping the yard, was done in mindfulness. I asked, Do you ever think you are enlightened? He laughed and gently shook his head. There's no need to know what I am. It's enough to feel I don't need anything. I understood. That was the answer of someone who has truly let go. No labels, no roles, just presence, just a quiet heart. Enlightenment is not a blinding light. It is when the clouds clear and the sky simply reveals itself, not because we created it, but because we stopped covering it up The Buddha didn't teach us to become superhuman. He taught us to return to being fully human, awake, compassionate, and unshaken. If today you find yourself letting go of a bit of anger, feeling a little lighter in your sorrow, releasing even a small craving, then perhaps you are already very close to enlightenment. And perhaps the most beautiful part of enlightenment is realizing that nothing needs to be beautiful. It only needs to be real. It only needs to be here. It only needs you to breathe and know that you are breathing. Part 3. What does an enlightened person feel? One morning during walking meditation, I walked beside an elderly German woman. She was over 70, her hair completely white, and her eyes deep and calm, like an autumn lake. Throughout the 10-day retreat, she hadn't asked a single question, nor spoken up during any Dharma sharing. But that morning, as the sun was just rising over the bamboo trees, she gently turned to me and asked in a whisper, "Dear teacher, does an enlightened person still have emotions? Do they still feel sadness, anger, pain like us?" I stopped and looked at the dewdrops on the fallen leaves, then turned to her and smiled. "Yes, dear one, but they are no longer a victim of their emotions. They are not swept away by them. They feel everything, yet nothing owns them. We often imagine that an enlightened person no longer feels anything. No sadness, no anger, no worry, as if they have left behind human life and no longer participate in its joys and sorrows. But that's not what the Buddha taught. An enlightened person does not lack emotions. They live fully with emotions, but are no longer bound by them. An arahant still feels the chill of winter winds. They still feel pain when others suffer. They still know compassion, tenderness, even grief. But through all of these feelings, there is no self-clinging, judging, or building a story around them. I once had a monastic friend who fell seriously ill during the rains retreat. He couldn't walk to the Dharma hall because of the pain in his joints. I visited him. He was thin, pale, but his eyes were bright, and his heart at peace. I asked, "Does it hurt much, brother?" He nodded. "Yes, of course. As long as there is a body, there will be sensations. But I don't suffer because of it." End part. Then, he added, "I feel pain, but I no longer ask, why me?" There is no resentment, no impatience. I just breathe with the pain and recognize it, like recognizing a cloud drifting across the sky. I sat with him a long time that day and understood something very deep. Pain is real, but suffering is what we add to it with our minds through resistance, fear, and stories. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "When greed, hatred, and delusion are no more, one lives like a calm, lakeno, longer, stirred." An enlightened person still lives in the world, but is not pulled around by it. They are present, fully and deeply, but not entangled. They love but don't possess. They help but don't attach. They feel pain but don't blame. They live but without the heavy shadow of I or mine. There's an image I love deeply. The wind passing through a field of rice. The wind is present, it cools. It moves gently through the grains, but it holds onto nothing. An enlightened person is like that. Emotions come and go like clouds across the sky, like waves reaching the shore, but they leave no trace. They live in this world, like a musician who plays their instrument freely, no longer needing to control the sound. They walk among us, but they are no longer led by the world. An ordinary person, when sadness comes, reacts by blaming, by drowning in it, or by trying to forget. An enlightened person, when sadness comes, just breathes and looks deeply into that sadness. They don't add a story. They don't treat sadness as the enemy. They simply recognize it like moonlight, resting on a quiet, lake-soft, steady, and without judgment. I remember a lay practitioner, an American woman, who lost a loved one during a retreat. She was devastated. She came to me and asked, "Teacher, if I practice well, will I stop feeling this pain?" I held her hand and replied, "It's not that you'll stop feeling pain. It's that you will stop running away from it. You'll learn to stay with a heart that has grown wider." I guided her to sit and breathe with the grief, not to suppress it, not to dramatize it, just to breathe with presence and compassion. And slowly, she began to learn how to live with what is, without fear. An enlightened person is not someone who disappears from the world. They don't retreat into the mountains or fly away to some celestial realm. They live right here with us, but without clinging, like a lotus blooming in the mud growing from it, but never stained by it. They smile, they cry, they live, they die just like everyone else. But within them, there is no one left who is bound by these experiences. No anger when misunderstood, no regret when things are lost, no anxiety about the future. They live each moment as if it were the last gift. If you've ever wondered, what does an enlightened person feel? I invite you to come back to your breath. Sit quietly. Breathe in knowing you are breathing in. Breathe out knowing you are breathing out. In that full presence, there's no need to know more, to achieve, or to prove anything. Perhaps, in that moment, you are already touching very close to the experience of one who is truly enlightened. Part 4. Enlightenment and Nibbana. Opening the door and stepping through. One day, during a tea meditation, a young person sat across from me, holding a warm cup in both hands. Their eyes were quiet and thoughtful, like someone who had been carrying a question for a long time. Finally, they asked, if enlightenment means seeing clearly the truth of suffering, impermanence, and non-self, then what is Nibbana, dear teacher? Is there a difference between enlightenment and Nibbana? I looked out into the garden behind the temple. A soft wind was passing through the bamboo, and the rustling leaves seemed to offer an answer on their own. I said, enlightenment is when the door opens. Nibbana is when you truly step through that door. We often speak of enlightenment as a special state, and Nibbana as the final destination. But in the Buddha's teachings, every concept is just a raft. Nibbana is not a place, nor is it disappearance. Nibbana is the absence of all things that cause suffering, craving, hatred, and delusion. It's like when fire has no more fuel. When the wood has burned completely, the flame goes out. No one needs to extinguish it. You can't ask, where did the fire go? The fire ceased not because it went anywhere, but because the conditions for it to burn no longer exist. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha used this very image. Just as a fire goes out when its fuel is exhausted, no one can say it has gone east or west. In the same way, when an arahant passes away, there is no more rebirth. Enlightenment is the direct and penetrating insight into reality, that all things are impermanent, all sensations arise due to conditions, and there is no fixed self behind them. When this truth is seen, the mind lets go. When the mind lets go, suffering ceases. And the end of suffering, that is the path into Nibbana. Literally, Nibbana means extinguishing, the extinguishing of the inner flames, the flame of craving, the flame of anger, the flame of ignorance. I remember once, during a Dharma talk in Europe, someone stood up and asked, Nibbana seems so far away. So when we're enlightened, do we really end all suffering? Or do we just understand it better? I asked back, when you dream that you're falling into a deep canyon, your heart races, you sweat, you panic, but the moment you wake up, is the canyon still real to you? They smiled and nodded. I said, enlightenment is waking up from the dream of concepts and projections. Nibbana is the deep peace that follows waking freedom without needing to escape. People often ask, if someone is enlightened, do they still live in the world? Do they still eat, work, love? The answer is yes. Enlightenment does not make one disappear from life. It simply means they live in the world without being dragged around by it. They eat, but are not attached to flavor. They love, but without demanding the other to be anything else. They feel pain, but without fear. They live, but with nothing left to hold on to. And when the body dissolves, there is nothing to return to the cycle of rebirth. So, enlightenment is the opening of the door. Nibbana is the step beyond that door, never needing to return to confusion again. Once, I was walking beside a group of young people near a still lake. The surface of the water was like glass. One of them asked, "Why is the water so clear, teacher?" I replied, "Because no one is disturbing it." Then I said, "The mind of an enlightened person is like this. You don't need to make it calm. Just stop disturbing it." Nibbana is not something forced. It's not a state we create. It is the natural quality of the mind when it is no longer conditioned by greed, hatred, or delusion. The Buddha called Nibbana the supreme peace, the most secure refuge, the end of all formations. But he did not encourage us to chase after Nibbana as a reward, because chasing itself is one of the flames that needs to go out. So, we must be subtle. Don't run after Nibbana like a prize. And don't dismiss it as something abstract. Instead, observe your own body and mind. When your heart is less greedy, less angry, less restless, then, in that moment, you are already tasting a little bit of Nibbana. Someone once asked me, "Is Nibbana joyful?" I smiled and said, "It's not joyful in the usual way, not the joy of having, or the joy of achieving, but a joy that is deep, quiet, like a lake with no waves, a freedom that no longer fears birth or death. When you no longer need to become anyone, no longer need to prove anything, no longer fear losing or dying, then you are already dwelling in Nibbana. You could say, enlightenment is awakening. Nibbana is resting. Enlightenment is seeing. Nibbana is no longer being pulled by what is seen. Enlightenment is letting go. Nibbana is having nothing left to let go of. And so, they are not separate. Enlightenment leads to Nibbana. Nibbana confirms that the enlightenment is true. If you're walking the path of practice, don't look for Nibbana as something far away. Look into your own heart. When you breathe and feel at peace, when you release a grudge or an expectation, when you watch a leaf fall and your heart remains still, in that moment, Nibbana is no longer theory. It is this breath, this step, this smile that needs no reason. And if you are there, then you are already standing very close to the doorway of Nibbana. Part 5. images of enlightenment in different traditions. But Buddhism sees it differently. In every culture, human beings have an innate tendency to seek a highest truth, a place of ultimate refuge for the heart amid the uncertainty of life. From the caves of ancient Greek hermits to the deep forests of India, people have long asked, what is the ultimate reality? Who am I? Is there an eternal realm? And the answers, across spiritual traditions, though often different in form, share something in essence. They point toward the dissolution of the ego and emerging into something greater than the individual self. In Hinduism, this is known as Brahman Thay, absolute reality, beyond all description. The highest goal of the spiritual path is to realize that the true self, Atman, is not separate from Brahman. They call this realization Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. In that insight, the boundary between self and world vanishes. The individual and the universal are simply two aspects of a single boundless stream. A wave cannot be separated from the ocean. In Sufi Islamic mysticism, the seeker walks the path of fana complete, dissolution of the ego in divine love. They liken themselves to a drop of water falling into the ocean, not losing themselves, but realizing they were never separate. In the poetry of Rumi and Hafiz, enlightenment is described in the language of sacred longing, of a love so deep that there is no longer a distinction between lover and beloved, subject and object. In Christian mysticism, saints such as Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross speak of union with God, where the personal will dissolves into the divine will. There is no longer an I wanting anything. Only divine love moves. This is the death of the ego, not through violence, but by surrendering gently, like a leaf falling into the hands of heaven. In Taoism, enlightenment does not come through accumulating knowledge, but through letting go of concepts and living in harmony with the Tao Te, invisible principle that governs all things. The Taoist sage does not resist, does not force, does not compete. They live like water soft, yet unshakable, flowing around rocks without needing to fight. The idea of wu-wei effortless action is a beautiful image of a mind free from the need to prove or control. When we read or listen to these spiritual paths, we can feel a profound common thread. They all point toward the end of the sense of a separate self. Whether the language is union with God, merging into the Supreme Self, or living in harmony with the way, they are all expressions of one thing. The self is no longer the center of the universe. But here, Buddhism, especially early Buddhism, takes a unique and quiet turn. The Buddha did not encourage us to merge with any kind of absolute. He did not present a supreme entity for us to dissolve into, because if there's still an absolute, then the ego might sneak in through the back door, wanting to hold on to it. In the Buddha's view, all phenomena, including lofty concepts like God, Tao, or ultimate being, are conditioned phenomena, arising due to causes and conditions. They do not have an independent essence. They do not exist eternally. Buddhism does not deny deep peace or unshakable happiness, but instead of inviting us to unite with something grand, the Buddha simply taught us to look closely at each step, each breath, and to see that everything is interdependent, impermanent, and not self. When this is clearly seen, all suffering, all grasping, all imagination about I and mine dissolve note, because they're eliminated, but because we see that they never had a real foundation to begin with. Someone might ask, isn't that a little cold? Doesn't it lack poetry? But in truth, those who truly practice and see into this deeply do not feel emptiness or loneliness at all. On the contrary, they find life more full than ever. When we no longer see ourselves as the center, we begin to feel the presence of life in every raindrop, every glance, every breeze. When we no longer feel the need to merge with something higher, we finally live in what is. We don't need to merge into the ocean because we were never separate from it. We don't need to return home because we've never left. For one who awakens according to the Buddha's vision, there is nothing to attain, no truth to cling to, no absolute to become one with, only a simple seeing. All things are dependently arisen. Each sensation, each thought, each contact, like a bell ringing in, space arises, resounds, and fades. And in that seeing, there is a very real peace, not because something has been added, but because there is no longer anything to add. No more longing for unity, no more dreams of something beyond the world. Only life simple, immediate, untouched by the shadow of self. That is freedom. And perhaps, among all the paths toward the light, this view light, as a breath, quiet as a distant staris, one of the most precious gifts the Buddha left to humankind. Not loud, not dogmatic, not embellished, just a simple seeing. And when it is truly seen, every question dissolves like mist in the morning sun, like a dreamer gently waking, like a soft laugh rising from within, not because of anything, but because there is nothing left to worry about. Part V. What really happens when a person is enlightened? If one day you meet an enlightened person, you might not notice anything unusual. They don't glow, they don't walk on air, and they don't look at others with a mystical gaze. They might be washing dishes in a small diner, sweeping the courtyard of a monastery, or quietly sitting under a tree, just like everyone else. But if you are present enough to truly feel, you will sense something different in theme: a natural stillness. No effort, no pretense, no me trying to practice or be someone special, just life simple, serene, and unconditioned. So what really happens when someone attains enlightenment? If we expect a miracle like a blinding light or a rush of ecstasy, we may be disappointed. Enlightenment is not about gaining something. It's about letting go of what isn't real, like someone who has been tensing their shoulders for years without realizing it, only to finally release and feel the deep fatigue they had long carried. Or like a traveler who's wandered for years, only to stop, turn around, and realize they never left home. Enlightenment is not about adding, but returning. Not about transforming into someone else, but about realizing that this self was never fixed. It's not about becoming perfect, but seeing clearly that what we called me was nothing more than layers of habit, memory, conditioning, and craving. When someone becomes enlightened, They are no longer the center of their world. They no longer see themselves as someone special who needs to be validated, loved, or proven right. They see themselves as a part of the whole present, but not occupying space. Like a cloud drifting across the sky, no one tells it where to go, and no one tries to hold it back. And because of that, it is truly free. In them, emotions still arise. There are still moments of sadness, of tenderness, of awe, before a sunset or a crying child. But those emotions are like the wind brushing through a field passing, leaving no trace, because they don't identify with them, don't build stories around them, don't cling or push them away. They let everything come and go in awareness. And because of that, they live very genuinely, without hiding, defending, or pretending. Enlightenment does not make one superhuman, but helps them be fully human. They can laugh at a child picking flowers, fall silent at the sound of a morning bell, or feel their heart ache as they bid farewell to a loved one. But these experiences don't shake them, because there is no self left to be hurt, no mind to protect, just an open heart, able to embrace, but not cling. The greatest transformation of the enlightened isn't external, but in how they relate to life. They no longer need to argue to prove they're right. They don't live for recognition. They are not bound by the past, nor worried by the future. They live fully in the present, not as a slogan, but as a lived truth. An enlightened person might eat meals with their family, work in an office, teach, garden, or walk in the park, just like anyone else. But their inner life is entirely different. When they eat, they simply eat. When they wash dishes, they simply wash dishes. Nothing extra, nothing fake. No need to act spiritual. They are not trying to be a practitioner. They simply live with an empty, loving heart. The Buddha once said, "The enlightened are no longer reborn." But this does not mean they disappear. It means they are no longer caught in birth and death as suffering. The body still grows, ages, gets sick, and dies, but they are not swept away by it. Like the sunset, it doesn't vanish. We just see it differently. The enlightened live without being possessed by life. They die without being consumed by death. And the most beautiful thing is, they have no need to announce enlightenment. They don't proclaim it. They don't need anyone to crown them. And no one can truly certify them. Enlightenment doesn't require declarations. It reveals itself in how one lives, speaks, breathes, and remains silent. Like a lotus blooming in the mud, it doesn't need a label for us to know it's a lotus. Someone once asked me, "How do you know if someone is truly enlightened?" I replied, "Look at them in the small things. Do they walk gently? Do they really listen when someone speaks? Are they still reactive when facing hardship?" A truly enlightened person doesn't need to preach. Their life itself is the clearest Dharma talk. What happens when someone is enlightened is not that they float above the earth, but that they walk more firmly upon it. Not that they lose emotions, but that emotions no longer dominate them. Not that they withdraw from life, but that they live it deeply as if each day were their last. And most of all, they don't make others feel small. They don't create distance. They don't make you look up to them. They invite you to sit down beside them, to breathe, to smile. They don't awaken just for themselves, but through their presence they open the door for others to enter too. So, what really happens when someone is enlightened? Not much and everything. Nothing is added, just lessened. Less grasping, less fear, less holding on, less self. And in that less, another world is revealed deep, spacious, full of love, a world no longer steeped in suffering from delusion, attachment, and striving. Just life pure and natural like rain on a leaf, a bell in the air, a smile without a reason. And that, perhaps, is the greatest miracle of all. Dear friend, if you've stayed with me until now, perhaps you too have carried in your heart the question, what is enlightenment? Really? Is it real? And is it even possible for me? The answer doesn't lie in theory, nor can it be handed to you by someone else. Enlightenment is not a summit you must climb to see. It is when you stop right here, right now, and look deeply into the present moment, without decoration, without avoidance. A person who is enlightened doesn't become a god. They don't run away from the world or shield themselves from ordinary pain. They simply lay down the burden of the self they once clung to, and when there's no longer a need to become anyone at all, they are finally able to live truly with themselves. As the Buddha taught, enlightenment is the ending of the 10 fetters, the inner chains that keep us spinning through samsara. When we no longer cling to this body as me, no longer take feelings as mine, no longer fear, no longer seek, then nibbana appears, like a clear sky after a storm, like a lamp extinguished because there is no more oil to burn. If you are on that path even, if you're still wandering, still unsure, still finding your way, please know this: you are not alone. We walk this path together. We breathe together. We learn, again and again, how to stop and let go. And each time we return to our breath, we take one more step toward freedom. If this reflection has touched something in you, I invite you to leave a comment below. Tell me, where are you now on your journey? What does enlightenment mean to you? And what are you truly longing for in your spiritual life? You're warmly welcome to like this video, subscribe to TT-Buddhism, and join us as we continue to explore the Buddha's path of mindfulness and liberation. Every video on this channel is a gentle invitation. Come home, look deeply, and live mindfully in the midst of ordinary life. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you again in the next video, where we will open another door together into this quiet and profound truth. Enlightenment isn't something strange or distant. It is the simple, beautiful clarity of a heart that knows how to love without clinging.